The family that vacations together stays together. At least, that was the plan. Except now, the dastardly desk clerk is saying he can't confirm your connecting rooms.
Wait, what?
That's right, ma'am. You have rooms 201 and 709.
No, we cannot be 5 floors away from our kids.
The doors have double locks. They'll be fine.
When you want connecting rooms confirmed before you arrive, it matters where you stay.
Welcome to Hilton. I see your connecting rooms are already confirmed.
Hilton, for this day.
Welcome back to another edition of the Disney Dish Podcast with Jim Hill. It's me, Len Testa, and this is our show for the week of Schmurz Day, July 10th, 2023. Happy Bastille Day, mes amis. On the show today, news, listener questions, and in surveys, let's just call it Fast Pass Plus Plus. Then in our main segment, Jim tells us about the history of Toy Story Mania. Let's get started by bringing in the man who quotes a lot of Taylor Swift lyrics to his therapist. It's Mr. Jim Hill. Jim, how's it going?
Look, Len, as Taylor put it oh so eloquently in the bonus track of her debut album, I'm only me when I'm with you.
That's touching. Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Why wouldn't I quote from this very talented young woman who, by the way, just added 14 new dates to her 2024 European tour? I mean, I know that you and your daughter actually got to go to a Taylor Swift concert recently, and I've been making inquiries about, how I might be able to maybe get a seat to this European tour. Sadly, Len, it turns out that no one on the dark web is interested in purchasing a slightly used 64-year-old kidney.
I hold out faith for you, Jim, that you'll find tickets. By the way, did I tell you about how I learned about the price of kidneys and lungs?
Oh, no, but
All
boy,
right.
we're interesting.
This is taking a left turn already. Okay, here we go.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we go.
So a couple months ago, a tour used Eddie Van Halen guitar went up for auction. And he used it on the 1984 tour. He also used it during the Hot for Teacher video. So stage played for a long time, Eddie Van Halen Frankenstrat replica. There are not very many of these in the world. So the auction price was $1.8 million. That's the beginning bid. And I thought to myself, just out of curiosity, how much does a kidney and a lung get you on the open market? And Jim, the prices were vastly lower than I expected. So a lung of a young, healthy non-smoker is only $250,000 on the open market, and kidneys are $15K. And the problem with that is, Jim, right? If the guitar ended up selling for $3.9 million. The problem is, just from a paperwork perspective, if I showed up at a hospital with $3.9 million worth of lungs and kidneys, the number of questions I would have to answer about that makes the whole thing unappealing to me. Okay? And that's what stopped me, Jim. That's what stopped me.
Security to the ER.
There we go. But on the other hand, just rolling the luggage cart into the building with that many Tupperware containers, and it's like, hey, do you guys have any freezer space? I'm just asking.
I was talking to Laurel about it, and I'm like, well, what if I just say, what if I just tell the hospital, look, do you want the organs or not? And she just looked at me like, not going to fly. I blame the government.
There we go. There we go.
All right, Jim, let's do a quick shout out to subscribers over at disneydish.bandcamp.com. Thanks to new subscribers S. Atwood, Mile High Mouse, Matt Austin 78, and Samantha Glenn. And longtime subscribers Jason Back, Jason Hernandez, Diane Whiting, and Glenn Roos. Jim, these are the Disney Imagineers banned from ever programming the Lincoln animatronic at Hall of Presidents. After that one time, Abe went on stage with a Pete Wentz haircut, shouted to the audience, "It's not a phase, this is who I am," before singing Ohio is for Lovers. True story. I've had a lot of coffee today, Jim. I've had a lot of coffee today.
That's not obvious at all, Len. All right. Moving on. Okay.
On to the news. Jim, the first Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party event has sold out. Not surprisingly, it's for Halloween, October 31st. And for those of you who are interested in tickets, the next event to usually sell out is the first one, which I believe is August 11th, or Jim, 32 days from now. Also, Also, Jim, not really news, but more of a rumor. I've mentioned a couple of times on the show that we're doing some old-fashioned queuing theory work in the parks. Things like counting how many people are in the big rope drop groups, how many people arrive per minute after opening, and things like that. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we noticed with Lightning Lane use is that the number of guests using the Lightning Lane at certain attractions was much, much higher than the highest Genie Plus usage number ever reported by Disney. And that's true even if we don't count all of the guests using VIP tours, which is actually a really small number, relatively speaking. So in asking around about this, like why are there so many people using the Lightning Lane line, I'm hearing that Disney's seen a dramatic rise in the number of guests using the DAS service to access Lightning Lane at rides.
Okay, just to interrupt here for a sec, for those who aren't familiar with DAS, that's the Disability Access Service thing for the parks, right?
Right. So it's a thing where you can, if you've got a disability, either an apparent or non-apparent disability, that prevents you from standing in long lines. It's the service that you can use at Disney that allows you to avoid most of the waiting in line at parks. Very popular, been used for years. Great idea. Okay. So apparently then, for some attractions, the number of guests using DAS is at an all-time high. And as an example of what that means, I've been told by cast members who worked at Toy Story Mania back in the day that at the height of its popularity, something like 4 out of 5 guests using the FastPass line at Toy Story Mania were using DAS. Ooh. Okay. Now, there are perfectly legitimate explanations for why this could be happening, right? Number one, Disney does a great job these days of advertising the fact that DAS exists, right? So it could be that more people who need to know about it are actually learning about it, and that's good, right? Also, because you can schedule your interview in advance for DAS, people who need the service might find it easier to sign up than having to wait in line when you get to the parks. All valid reasons to use DAS, right? Also, the CDC says that around 1 in 4 Americans has some sort of disability. And if I had to make an assumption, one way or the other, my assumption would be that the tens of thousands of people in a Disney park each day probably reflect that same 1 in 4 ratio, because 2 large samples from the same population should, in theory, show the same characteristics, right? So, and the other thing that I forgot when I first started looking at this was, if you're one of those 1 in 4 people and you've got 2 family members who want to ride with you, that could automatically explain the higher DAS use at popular attractions, because now you've got 3 people using 1 DAS pass, right? But still, Jim, what I'm hearing is that Disney's taking a close look at who and how DAS is being used in the parks. So I would not be surprised to see some modification of those rules in the next year.
This is kind of cyclic. I mean, I remember back in the 80s and the 90s, this very same thing coming up. Folks began to notice that there seemed to be a rather large group of folks who were sort of backdooring into attractions. And going to be interesting to see how this shakes out, because whether it's visible or not, there are a lot of folks who need to take advantage of these systems.
Right. And Disney legally can't ask you what your disability is, right?
There you go.
But I think, looking at the CDC numbers and knowing that people visit Walt Disney World in groups, and as long as one person has the disability, everyone is eligible. That might explain all of it. The thing that reminded me of this, though, is I was standing in line for a flight, I don't know, a couple of months ago, and like they say that people who need a little bit more time, boarding the flight can go first, and because overhead storage space is now at a premium, because airlines charge for checked luggage now. There was this one flight I was on where the guy next to me and I, standing in line for our, our group 12 or whatever we were, we counted 27 people who were not in wheelchairs taking advantage of the early boarding. And the guy turned to me and said, "Is there an epidemic of non-apparent disabilities going on just on this flight? Like 27% is like 10% of the people on the flight." And so anytime the stakes are high, there are a certain number of people who are willing to game this system, and I think that's the thing that Disney wants to make sure is not happening.
But what do you put in place if this is the issue? So
it would be difficult, and Disney's in a tough spot here because they do really good at accommodating lots of things, but at the same time, the more generous you are, the easier it is to manipulate. So we'll see.
Absolutely.
All right, Jim, on to surveys. Many listeners, including Amy and John, sent in a Disney survey posted to Facebook that asked how you feel about potential upcoming changes to Genie Plus that would And here's a radical idea, Jim. Make it a paid version of FastPass Plus. Who'd have thought it? All right. I actually have a copy of the survey, including all the screens. And so for clarity, I don't normally read all of the surveys anymore, but because this survey actually goes into detail about the rules around which fast passes you can get, and by fast passes I mean Genie Plus, but I'm just going to start calling it fast pass. I'm going to read most of the survey. All right, so here we go.
Okay.
So imagine a service that you can purchase, and there are two such products. One is Lightning Lane entry to select attractions and experiences offered through a new service, a modified version of Genie Plus, and or individual Lightning Lane entry to specific attractions. Okay. They're calling it Modified Disney Genie Plus, a name that just rolls off the tongue. Okay. You can purchase it pre-arrival for all of the days of your visit at the same time, and individual Lightning Lane would remain a separate transaction. The prices would be between $15 and $35 per person per day, and you can buy this new service as early as 7 days prior to the first day of park visit for guests staying at a Disney resort. And for everyone else, 3 days. So remember, with the old FastPass Plus system, Disney Resort guests could book their FastPasses 60 days in advance, and everyone else was at 30 days. Same rule here, except it's 7 and 3.
Okay.
You could also have a choice of available return times. So right now with Genie Plus, and with individual Lightning Lane, it's basically take it or leave it. But remember, in the old FastPass system, you had a range of return times that you could select. So it looks like the modified Genie Plus goes back to that.
Okay.
Also, you can modify the return times. Your pre-arrival choices could include, Jim, guess how many experiences you could pre-book in this new Genie Plus version.
Okay.
Remember, it was 3 with FastPass Plus. What do you think the number is?
I'm gonna go on a limb here, Len. 3.
God, Jim, you're so good. 3. Yes, 3.
3. What a surprise. Okay.
Also, Jim, do you remember how in certain parks there were 2 levels of fast passes available for certain attractions? What did we call this?
The 2-tier thing. What did we call
Tier,
it?
right? Yeah. So there's this line that says, "Hey, you can you can select one experience from Tier A, and up to 2 experiences pre-arrival from Tier B."
B. There we go. Wow.
All right, and then Disney actually goes through a number of scenarios with this survey and says, okay, how would you like it if this was the particular set of categories to choose from? So in this case, individual Lightning Lane at the Magic Kingdom would still be Seven Dwarfs and Tron.
Okay.
The Tier A attractions would be Big Thunder, Jungle Cruise, Peter Pan, and Space Mountain. And the Tier B would be everything else. Jim, it's 2015 again, baby.
I know. Oh my God. I just can they do this? Can
Also,
they act, yeah.
Also, the other interesting thing is the new Genie Plus would go back to the old FastPass Plus system where you could pick your 3, then you could pick more on day of, but it would remove the Genie Plus limitation of only being able to ride one ride once per day using it. So remember, in FastPass, in the FastPass Plus days, if there were 15 FastPasses available for Peter Pan, you could grab them if no one else did. In Genie Plus, that went away. You only got 1 ride per person per day under Genie Plus. We're going back to the old FastPass system now where if there's availability, you get to use it.
Oof.
All right. So in Epcot, the individual Lightning Lane would still be Guardians. The Tier 1 or the Tier A attractions would be Frozen, Remy, Soarin', and Test Track, and everything else would be Tier 2.
Okay.
In the studios, Rise of the Resistance would still be the individual Lightning Lane. The Tier 1 attractions, you want to take our Tier A attractions, want to take a guess?
Got to assume that Mickey and Minnie's is in the mix there. It's the newest. What else we got? Okay.
Where do people go to first thing in the morning in Hollywood Studios? That's not Rise.
Slinky Dog Dash?
Slinky Dog Dash is another one. You got 2 more.
Given this park has so few rides. What is it?
At this point,
Rocket Roller Coaster.
Rocket Roller Coaster's 1, yeah. And then you got 1 more.
Tower? No. Oh, Smuggler's Run?
Smuggler's Run. Good job. Okay.
Really?
And then everything, and then everything else would be in Tier 2 or Tier B, whatever it is.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Over at Animal Kingdom, Flight of Passage would still be individual Lightning Lane. The 2 Tier A experiences would be, you want to take a guess?
Even smaller pool to choose from. Festival of the Lion King.
That'd be a good guess, but no. Because shows have a lot of capacity. Yeah.
Okay. What else? All right. Expedition Everest.
Yep. Good. That's one of the two.
And what is the other one? I'm sorry. I'm drawing a blank.
Navi River Journeys. Yeah. So basically the new
Really?
rides. The new rides from Tier A. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
So everything else would be in Tier B. Yeah. And Jim, I'm telling you, if they don't call it Fast Pass Plus Plus, an opportunity will have been lost. Anyway. The good news is, Jim, is that from a programming perspective, I never removed the old FastPass code from our touring plan optimization software. So the tiers are already built in. The rules are already built in. I literally just need to go, for you programmers out there, I just need to go back into Git and revert some changes, and things will be exactly the way that they were.
Okay, my one concern in this situation is think about we have our standard 3.75 years folks who return to Walt Disney World. The folks who just kind of figured out the new system, and upon returning the next time, you now have the thing that's sort of familiar but still different. And just it bothers me that the Disney World learning curve never gets any easier. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's got to be lovely for someone like yourself who works the touring plan side of the street. You know, it's like, well, if you need some help, I know a book.
Exactly. I can make all these problems go away for $20. Exactly. You know, I'm just saying.
There we go. Okay.
All right, Jim, let's move on to listener questions. A quick correction on my part, Jim. On last week's show, I mentioned that the Mickey-shaped pond near the old Walt Disney World Speedway was still there, using Google Maps as a reference. And when I got up early morning when the show was released, I already had texts of aerial images from our friend BioReconstruct showing that the pond was no longer there. And Jim, I have to say, I didn't know before I met BioReconstruct that I needed a friend with a helicopter. And now I don't know how I would live without him.
Well, as long as we're mentioning BioReconstruct and his so polite way of pointing out errors, didn't happen on this podcast. Happened on the one that I do with Aaron Adams, a talented gentleman who edits this podcast. But on a recent episode of Marvel Us Disney, I confused the Dr. Phillips Center for the Performing Arts, which is on Magnolia, with the Dr. Phillips High School, which is directly behind Islands of Adventure on Turkey Lake. And as BioReconstruct pointed out, this is easy to do because there are lots of things in this part of Florida named after the late Dr. Phillips. There's Dr. Phillips, the unincorporated area in Orange County and a suburb of Orlando, not to mention the Dr. Phillips Baby Place at Winter Park Memorial Hospital and the Orlando Health Dr. Phillips Hospital. By the way, all of these entities are named after the famous philanthropist Philip, one of the Orlando's first millionaires, made his fortune in citrus. Born in 1874, died in 1959 at the ripe old age of 85, and his good works are continued even today through the efforts of the Dr. Phillips Charity. So apologies for getting that wrong, but again, nice to have BioReconstruct in our corner.
It's funny that you mentioned Dr. Phillips, because the only BioReconstruct correction I've ever got about Dr. Phillips is when BioReconstruct reminds me, technically, it's Dr. Phillips Monster. Anyway, another email. This one from Phyllis, who says, I was listening to the June 12th podcast, and I was surprised to hear you mention the 4th of July parade in Travis on Staten Island. I was born and raised on Staten Island and attended that parade multiple times. In fact, my dad was asked to drive his antique cars in the parade, and as a child I can remember dressing up in old clothes and riding in the car with my family. Here's some photos of my dad with his cars, and also some trivia. There's a house in Travis that was used in the Splendor in the Grass, the movie with Natalie Wood and Warren Beatty. Oh, that's awesome.
Oh, cool.
Thank you, Phyllis.
Wow.
I'm glad we could bring back that memory for you. And speaking of memories, Annie writes in and says, I've been thoroughly enjoying the last couple of episodes about the Walt Disney World Speedway. Ooh, it's a good job there, Jim. In 2006, I watched rookie Marco Andretti lose by 0.06 seconds to Sam Hornish Jr. in the Indy 500, and from then on, I was completely hooked on IndyCar racing. So much so that for my 18th birthday in 2009, my parents surprised me with the two-seater experience at the Disney Speedway. And this was the one where you sat in a modified Indy car with the passenger sitting directly behind the driver. On my day, it was Davey Hamilton, and I note that Davey Hamilton had 3 top 10 Indy finishes, so a legit Indy car driver.
Holy cow.
And he writes, while we were waiting for the solo drivers to complete their laps, I was over on the wall talking to the crew and Davey about current drivers and how the season was going. So when it was time to decide who got to go first in the ride, I don't think any of the others thought there was even a chance they could go in front of me. This meant I got to do 2 warm-up laps with Davey, and during which I learned that the swerving that the cars do to warm up the tires is way more abrupt in the car. And then I did 3 laps at the top speed of 180 miles an hour. As we accelerated out of turn 4 and started towards that speed, it took everything in me not to hold my arms up and scream for joy. It was and still is the best feeling I've ever had. My mother, on the other hand, said she was fine until we sped up to 180, and she realized that it was her only child in that small metal shell, now hurtling around the racetrack. When I was done, I jumped out of the car and started hugging everyone around me and exclaiming how amazing it was. I'm not saying my voice may have gone up a couple of octaves, but one of the crew members said, "I didn't know we gave Mickey Mouse a ride." I've attached some pictures from my experience. Thanks for letting me relive the 3rd best day of my life, the first being the birth of my daughter and the second being my wedding day. Oh, that is awesome.
That is. That's a great story. Wow.
I'm glad I got I remember the top speed of 180. So that was good. That's a great story, Annie.
Yeah, great job.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, Jim tells us how Disney has adapted the Toy Story Mania ride to fit into 3 different theme parks. We'll be right back.
This episode is brought to you by Better Sleep. We've all had a night like this, a night where you wanted to sleep, well, you needed to sleep because of all the things you need to accomplish the following day. But because you just couldn't turn your brain off, you then got a lousy night's sleep, which then put you behind the 8 ball the following morning. Look, we all want to roll out of bed and hit the ground running, but that's really tough to do if you haven't gotten the rest you need. If you're looking to find a way to rein in all of those thoughts that race through your head just as your head hits the pillow, well, maybe it's time you tried the Better Sleep app, your toolkit when it comes to improved rest. With the Better Sleep app, you can personalize your sleep experience by choosing among over 200 soothing sounds, not to mention a range of smart features that will help you sleep faster, deeper, and for longer. Over the past few weeks, I've been exploring Better Sleep's expansive library, sampling audio tracks from categories like ASMR, meditation, and brainwaves. And I have to tell you, it's actually been kind of fun to try to build a personalized soundscape, something that mixes my favorite sounds with color noises, who knew there was such a thing, to help me craft the perfect bedtime soundtrack. And just so you know, I'm not the only one who's been enjoying the Better Sleep app. It's one of the most positively reviewed apps in the Apple App Store, over 600,000 reviews and counting. Look, sleep experts will tell you that high-quality rest is vital to mental well-being and physical health. And if you've been struggling to calm your mind at bedtime, well, why not try the app that's had over 55 million downloads? When you sleep better, you feel better. Improve your quality of life in as little as 1 week. Download Better Sleep from your App Store or Google Play. That's Better Sleep on the App Store or Google Play. We thank them for sponsoring today's show.
This episode is brought to you by Marqeta. When it comes to your payments provider, you can't afford to compromise. Marqeta's modern payment solutions flex with your business without the trade-offs. Stable and agile, secure and innovative, scalable and configurable. If they say you can't have it all, don't believe them. Your business demands more. Choose a payments provider that delivers more. Choose Marqeta. Visit marqeta.com/Spotify to learn more.
This episode is brought to you by 20th Century Studios' new film, Springsteen, Deliver Me From Nowhere, starring Golden Globe winner Jeremy Allen White and Academy Award nominee Jeremy Strong. Scott Cooper, the director of the Academy Award-winning movie Crazy Heart, brings you the story of the most pivotal chapter in the life of an icon. Springsteen, Deliver Me From Nowhere. Only in theaters October 24th. Get your tickets now.
We just talked about Toy Story Mania in the opening of the show, and you've got the history of this attraction and how Disney's managed to adapt it to 3 separate parks, right?
Yeah, but again, if we're tracking the history of Toy Story Midway Mania, how this attraction wound up in California Adventure, Disney Hollywood Studios, and Tokyo Disney Seas, we actually have to start our story with an earlier Toy Story-themed interactive attraction, which is Buzz Lightyear Astro Blaster. Now, there are several Astro Blasters around the globe. One in Anaheim, one in Tokyo. Used to be one in Hong Kong, but that Astro Blaster closed August of 2017 to make way for that theme park's Ant-Man and the Wasp Nano Battle attraction. But the version of Buzz Lightyear Astro Blaster concerns us today. It's the one that opened at Disneyland Park March 27, 2005, just in time for Disneyland's 50th anniversary.
Okay.
So this ride-through shooter basically got shoehorned into Disneyland's old Circle Vision 360 theater. Visitors of the park didn't care. They loved Buzz Lightyear Astro Blaster right from the start, which did not go unnoticed by Matt Ouimet, who was then the president of the Disneyland Resort. On a parallel track, we have Kevin Rafferty and Robert Coltrane, who were the Imagineers who were riding herd on the Finding Nemo submarine voyage project. That's the resurrection of Disneyland's Subs ride, which had closed back September of 1998 and was slowly chugging along at this point. This is summer of 2005 at this point in our story. And Nemo, the Nemo-themed sub revival wouldn't come online until 2 years later, June 11, 2007.
Okay, so we're still 2 years out from the opening of the subs, but we've got Imagineers on site in Disneyland.
That's it exactly. In fact,
Okay.
Rafferty and Coltrane were doing so much work on site at Disneyland that Matt knew who these guys were on site. And as Kevin recounts in his excellent memoir, Magic Journey, My Fantastical Walt Disney Imagineering Career, he and Robert are walking through the halls of 1401 Flower Street one day in the summer of 2005 when they bump into Matt. And Ouimet says, "You two are just the two I'm looking for." He then goes on to say that he likes the interactive game aspect of Buzz Lightyear Astro Blaster and was hoping that we could come up with another family-friendly game-based attraction. But this one was going to need to be built over at California Adventure.
Okay, so pause there for a second, Jim, because you and I have actually walked the halls of 1401 Flower Street. And if somebody walked up to us and said, "You two are just the two I'm looking for," we would have both turned around and run, right? Right? We would have.
I would have assumed yes. That would have been somebody from security. All right, we
split
found
up and
them.
run.
Okay.
Exactly. They can't catch both of us if we're not together.
And by the way, do you remember that corridor in Imagineering that sort of did the faux monorail windows?
Monorail, yeah. Okay, so real quick, in 1401 Flower Street, in Imagineering, there's a hallway built to look like a virtual monorail, complete with like moving glass and stuff like that. It's very cool. Okay.
Yeah, but it was literally at that point. In fact, in the book, Kevin describes how that's where Matt bumped into him and Robert in that space. Anyway, Rafferty goes on to say in the book that there's one thing I've learned over the years, and that's ideas have a better chance of being approved, designed, and built when it satisfies the need or the want of a park operator. And here was the president of Disneyland personally asking myself and Robert for a new game-based attraction. So game on.
There you go.
What's not common knowledge at this point in Disney history is behind the scenes in 2005, the Imagineers are already taking a hard look at California Adventure. Disneyland Resort's second gate had opened 4+ years earlier, February 8th, 2001. And it had just not connected with the theme park going public, which is why WDI is now in the process of developing an extreme makeover of California Adventure.
Was the Extreme Makeover Home Edition actually an ABC show at this time? Is that where you got the reference from?
Yes, I did.
Oh,
yes,
look at you, Jim. Look at you. All right, go ahead.
Synergy.
Synergy.
All right, so the plan is to take this troubled theme park and make it much more like the one on the other side of the Esplanade, which, of course, is Disneyland Park. One of the key components of this DCA Extreme Makeover is the Imagineers were looking to cram as many Disney and Pixar characters into the place as possible. And given that Matt Ouimet had just asked Kevin and Robert Coltrane to develop a new family-friendly game-based attraction. This was one of those you got peanut butter in my chocolate moments. So Kevin and Robert began developing this idea. They decided they were going to build this family-friendly game-based attraction around the company's most famous character. And again,
Mary Poppins with a gun?
There we go. Mary Poppins. Okay.
Hey, this is where you tell me we're going to go in a different direction, right?
Potentially.
Fine.
Okay. So,
All right.
again, direct quote in Kevin's book. First place we went, story-wise, was the notion of having Mickey Mouse and his pals working the game booths on Paradise Pier. We even came up with a name for this family-friendly game-based attraction. Mickey's Midway Mania. A lot of M's there, Len.
Nice.
And given that Paradise Pier was about to get a big Mickey-related facelift, I mean, remember how the Sun Wheel literally became Mickey's Fun Wheel.
Right, the big Ferris wheel that was, for a while, the icon of DCA. Yeah. Okay.
There we go. Okay. This seemed like a smart way to go. But then, January 25th, 2006, just 6-7 months after, they've been handed this task, word comes down that the Walt Disney Company is going to be acquiring Pixar Animation Studios for $7.4 billion. That exact moment, Len, Disney's corporate agenda changes. Given the company's just handed out all of that cash to acquire Pixar, bring it in-house, word comes down from on high in Burbank that the Imagineers must now look for as many ways as possible to bring the characters and the stories told in Pixar's films into the Disney parks. And given that Kevin and Robert were very skilled when it came to reading the Disney corporate tea leaves, they were like, "Did we say Mickey's Midway Mania? Oh, our mistake. What we actually meant to say was Toy Story Midway Mania."
Yeah, that's it. That was the idea all along. Yeah, okay. All right.
And look, this decision has always rubbed some Disney theme park fans the wrong way. They insisted that following Buzz Lightyear Astro Blaster with Toy Story Midway Mania is sort of the equivalent of following a cheeseburger with a cheeseburger, and wasn't it Walt himself who once said that you can't top pigs with pigs? And it's
really, I don't remember this, because I believe it happened, but I don't, I definitely was not someone who thought, well, Toy Story Midway Mania is going to be a clone of Buzz Lightyear. To me, Disney communicated out pretty early on and very well that it was sort of the next generation. Yeah, okay.
Don't get me wrong. I mean, once the attraction was open and people saw, okay, it is an interactive ride-through shooter, but it's a very different experience.
Right.
But early on, it was like, really? Again? But all right, let's be honest here. There's a Disney studio that Walt himself ran in the 1930s, and then there's a multinational, vertically integrated corporation that exists today.
Sure.
And given that, on average, McDonald's sells 2.5 billion cheeseburgers a year, is it any wonder that Pixar is currently in the process of developing Toy Story 5?
Oh, I believe it.
By the way, we officially learned about this project February of this year. No info yet on a release date.
Yeah, Jim, when you said, it's like following a cheeseburger with a cheeseburger, my initial thought was, and I'm sure our listeners thought the same thing, was like, what's wrong with that? Like, that is completely logical. What? I refer you, sir, to the concept known as the double cheeseburger.
There we go. All right.
Anyway, Toy Story Mania. All right.
Okay. So, again, Matt WeMat has told Kevin and Robert that he wants another Buzz Lightyear Astro Blaster-like family-friendly game-based attraction, and that clone, again, remember, had been of the Buzz Lightyear Space Ranger spin from Walt Disney World, had been crammed into the old Circle Vision building with just barely an inch of spare land.
Okay.
Now, given that they knew that the show building that would have to be built to house Toy Story Midway Mania was going to have to be as big, if not bigger, than the one that housed Astro Blaster, Rafferty and Coltrane, quoting from Magic Journeys, they took a trip to Paradise Pier to scout the exact location of this new attraction. And Kevin turns to Robert and says, "I don't see how a ride can possibly fit here." As we stood in front of the long, straight span of coaster track for California Screamin' that towered above and was directly behind DCA's game booths, and then we visually measured the distance between the edge of the coaster track and the edge of the water in Paradise Bay. Now, want to acknowledge here that the original plan that Kevin and Robert were thinking of it, and again, this is the West Coast version of Toy Story Midway Mania, was to pull down those games of the boardwalk booths, and then at the very edge of the California Screaming coaster track, build the show building that was supposed to house this family-friendly game-based attraction out. So it would jet out into Paradise Pier and then maybe go up as far as Paradise Bay.
Really? That far out? I remember when you and I walked DCA earlier this year with former Imagineer Jim Scholl, one of the things that I remember Jim pointing out to us is there's an expansion pad behind behind the Incredicoaster that the entrance to whatever ride that's going to be, the entrance to that is under the structure.
It is.
For California.
In fact, what's fascinating is that's been there since day one, and they've had dozens upon dozens of plans about what could possibly go in there. Anyway,
amazing. That's creative. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so Robert had another idea when it came to where Toy Story Midway Mania could be placed. Again, I continue with quotes here. It says, here's what we'll do, Kevin. We blow right through the coaster. And Rafferty's response was, we blow right through the coaster as in blow right through the coaster. Coaster, it'll be okay. We'll cut a hole through the coaster structure and then enter the ride on this side, and then we'll put the ride building on this side. And it's like, and Kevin's like, I'm not going to suggest that to upper management.
We zip in, we zip out. Come on, it's Czechoslovakia. Okay, go ahead.
There we go. And Robert sits on and said, no, yes, you are. And management's going to go for this idea because we're going to leave Screaming open while we build under it and through it.
Ooh, Robert is a smart man. Go ahead. All right.
Yeah, now never mind, Len. We're talking about all sorts of key coaster structural support beams, plus a big honking electrical substation that is crucial to powering this entire side of the park. They're all in the way of Robert's proposed ride route for Toy Story Midway Mania. But he said, look, Matt, we met once a new interactive game boast thing for DCA, and if we keep Screaming open, management is going to go for this idea.
Yeah, I don't know anything about how to manage a theme park, but this seems to me like something that management would at least consider seriously.
There we go. Now, East Coast, very different situation. Where once the walking tour portion of Disney MGM's backstage tour stood, now there are 2 empty sound stages and Who Wants to Be a Millionaire Play It, which opened in Florida April 1st, 2001. And by the time the Pixar acquisition deal is announced in January of 2006, it's basically running on fumes.
And we just covered this in a couple of episodes not too long ago.
We did. So when the order comes down from on high that the Disney Parks are supposed to cram as much Pixar-related stuff in as they can, Disney Hollywood Studios takes the ball and runs with it. What they propose is taking all of Mickey Avenue and turning it into a new land for the park called Pixar Place. This would involve first shutting down Florida's version of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire Play It. They would then blow out the wall that separated the soundstage that housed Millionaire with the soundstage directly next door to create the massive show building for the East Coast version of Toy Story Midway Mania.
Do you remember, by the way, you and I walking this and you pointing out where this was all going to go? Because you and I did this before they built Toy Story Midway Mania. You were like, and here's where it's going to go. We walked along the entire length of the facade.
Yeah, but when they decided they were going to change Mickey Avenue into a Pixar-themed land in the middle of the park, and some of the decisions, Len, were so inside baseball. Like Mickey Avenue is that space between the show building for the old Great Movie Ride and sound stages 1, 2, and 3 from the walking tour.
It's basically the parallel street to Commissary Lane.
That's it, exactly.
But behind Great Movie Ride.
Okay. But here's the thing. In order to do some placemaking, what they decided to do is they would cover both sides of the street with the exact same color brick that was used to build the Steve Jobs building on the Pixar campus in Emeryville. And it was one of these things where it's like, really? This is going to matter to the folks in Florida? And it's like, absolutely.
I don't know if our listeners have experience in trying to match brick color, but as someone who's been through that remodel before for a 1960s mid-century modern house, let me say, Jim, you end up speaking to a lot of people in Europe. All right. It's not like going to Home Depot and saying, I need this colored brick. There are relatively few companies that manufacture the kind of brick that people are looking for. All right, go ahead.
But what's interesting is the folks in Florida felt like we had to do this because this sends the message to the folks back at Pixar that, look, we know you guys are into and we want to pay our respects to you and give people an authentic Pixar experience. So yes, it's important to get this brick color.
And the people at Pixar, the people that I've met anyway, are huge Disney theme park fans. So they would appreciate this kind of gesture far more than the average person would, right? They get it.
Okay, so just to recap here, West Coast, we're building a brand new show building, which involved cutting out supports for a standing roller coaster, which, by the way, still has to operate while this construction is going on.
Minor problem, sure. Go ahead.
Minor problem. Whereas on the East Coast, Mickey Avenue is literally in the center of the park.
It is the center of the park, yeah.
So, and the whole notion of you're going to shut down that artery, which, again, remember, this was back when Honey, I Shrunk the Kids play area was operating. This is when Streets of America, which also, remember, seasonally is where we're doing our Osborne Lights. Then the notion you're going to shut down the central artery to do this retheme. That's a big roll of the dice, and that's really going to impact park operations.
All right, so they've got to get this cleared by park management, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, but on East Coast, soon as the folks at Disney Hollywood Studios, it's like, go now. In fact, what's so fascinating, Glenn, is we've talked on recent shows about how Disney is operating Star Wars, the Galactic Star Cruiser, right to the end of this fiscal year.
Yeah, to the September 30th, yeah. And that's typically what they do. They close up everything at the last minute on the last possible day, which is September 30th. Of their fiscal year, yeah.
All right, now compare this to what they did with Who Wants to Be a Millionaire Play It at Disney's Hollywood Studios. They shut it down on August 19th, 2006. That is 6 weeks before the end of the fiscal year. It's like, no. We want this thing gone.
Regis who? What? Here's your hat. Here's your coat. You have to leave so soon? Goodbye.
Yeah. So, and mind you, this is 4 months out from when the project is officially announced on December 15th, 2006. And this is when the company reveals, okay, we are building 2 Toy Story Midway Manias. One of the East Coast, one of the West Coast. And by the way, Len, the last time they did this with the notion of, and I want to stress here, the idea was these 2 attractions were going to open within 2 weeks of one another in the late spring, early summer of 2008. Last time the company did this was in 1975 when the 2 bi-coastal versions of America on Parade, the bicentennial entertainment thing that ran at Disneyland Park and Walt Disney World's Magic Kingdom for 2 years, when that debuted.
Oh, that's interesting because so they went 30 years between launching 2 of the same thing in Disneyland and Walt Disney World. But then, Jim, I have to imagine that the people who worked on Toy Story Midway Mania, the 2 coast launch, probably when it came time to do Galaxy's Edge, Disney starts going, all right, bring me the name of everyone who worked on that 2 coast launch of Toy Story Mania, because guess what?
Well, if you can pull them away from their therapists, because this was challenging, Len. These were 2 $80 million a piece attractions being built on different coasts that needed ride vehicles, needed sets, needed programming. And so did everything go according to plan? We'll get to that part of the story on next week's final part of the story of Toy Story Midway Mania.
I love a good suspenseful moment, Jim. Way to go.
Okay. I do.
All right, folks, that's going to do it for the show today. You can help support our show and Jim Hill Media by subscribing over at disneydish.bandcamp.com, where you'll find exclusive shows never before heard on iTunes. And we just did an interview with former Imagineer Jonathan Ackley, who designed in-park games including the Kim Possible World Showcase Adventure and Sorcerers of the Magic Kingdom, so look for that soon. You can find more of Jim at jimhillmedia.com and more of me, Len, at touringplans.com. We're produced fabulously by Aaron Adams, who'll be recreating Michelangelo's Separation of Light from Darkness from the Sistine Chapel at the La Strada dei Pastilli Chalk Art Festival this Saturday and Sunday, July 15th and 16th, starting just outside the Insomnia Coffee Company on Main Street in beautiful downtown Hillsboro, Oregon. While Aaron's doing that, please go onto iTunes and rate our show and tell us what you'd like to hear next. For Jim, this is Len. We will see you on the next show.